Hello, my friends, and welcome as we dive into our Mother's Day study. Mother's Day can be an awesome and exciting day for many people, but for other people, it's a really hard day. It's a day where they miss their mother, or maybe they had a bad relationship with their mother, or they desired to be a mother and weren't able, or you're estranged from your kids, and there's lots of different reasons it can be hard. Well, we want to look at the strength that God gives all women, whether you're a biological mother or not, whether you're going through a hard time or not, whether you're with your kids or not. And we're going to do that by looking at a number of women in Moses' life. It's going to be a great study, so let's dive in. But before we do, let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you that you are God and that you are here. We thank you so much for the love that you've given us, for the way that you take care of each one of us. And we thank you for the way that you use mothers and you use women in our lives to make a huge impact. Today, as we're diving into your word, I pray that you'll speak to us, that you open our hearts and our minds, and you help us to understand you and love you a little bit more. We love you so much. In your name we pray. Amen. As we're diving into Moses' story, it starts a little bit before Moses is even on the scene with two women that are really, really courageous, but have a huge impact on Moses' life. So we're going to jump over to Exodus chapter 1, and we're going to start in verse 1. Here's what it says. These are the names of the sons of Israel, that is Jacob, who moved to Egypt with their father, each with his own family. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. In all, Jacob had 70 descendants in Egypt, including Joseph, who was already there. In time, Joseph and all his brothers died, ending that entire generation. But their descendants, the Israelites, had many children and grandchildren. In fact, they multiplied so greatly they began to become extremely powerful and fill the land. So these first few verses let us know what's happening over a number of years of history. After the famine that was in Canaan and Joseph's in the land of Egypt, he brings his whole family there. And unlike the Egyptians who had had to sell all of their land, all of their property, all of their cattle, and even themselves to the king in order to buy food, the king gave Joseph's family an allowance and he gave them land. So they were not technically in debt to the king of Egypt. But they begin to multiply and they begin to grow and they begin to get powerful. This is a very scary thing to a lot of people in control and in power when another nation or another people group begins to get large. So what happens in verse 8? Eventually, a new king or a new dynasty comes to power in Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. He said to his people, "Look, the people of Israel are now outnumber us and are stronger than we are. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't, and if wars break out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country." So what we see here is this new king or this new dynasty that has come to rule. It's not that they haven't heard of Joseph and all that he did for the land. They just don't care. They're seeing how great the people of Israel have become. And instead of being thankful and having gratitude towards this people who are now in their land, they are worried that the people are going to escape or that they will fight with their enemies. So somehow they have got to now get control over these people. The same way the Egyptians have control over their people because they all had to sell themselves to the king in order to eat during the famine. Now this new dynasty wants to get control of the people of Israel because they don't want them to escape. So the king goes about setting a few different plans on how to make this happen. So in verse 11, so the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. They forced them to build the cities of Pithon and Ramses as supply centers for the king. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more the Israelites multiplied and spread, and the more alarmed the Egyptians became. So the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and make bricks and do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless in all of their demands. So here's the first attempt. The king wants to control and subdue the people of Israel. He doesn't want them to leave because they are the backbone in the workforce in Egypt. They're intelligent. They're the ones who know how to build. They're the ones who know how to take care of the animals. They're the ones who are doing all the work. And so his first line of attack is let's enslave them. So he puts taskmasters over them and makes them work. And the more that he is cruel to them, the more he makes them work, the more they seem to populate. They're like rabbits. They just keep, there's more more and more, and they just keep popping up everywhere. Pharaoh is just not okay with this, so he tries to give them more and more demands, and he makes them do everything. He makes them make bricks, and he makes them build the cities, and he makes them take care of the animals. And this is backfiring on him, because it seems like the more that the people are oppressed, the more that God blesses them and they multiply. And so now their numbers are growing and they're stronger. This is terrifying to the king, so he sets about with another plan. In verse 15, then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave the order to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, when you help the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch as they deliver. If the baby's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. But because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king's orders. They allowed the boys to live too. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives. Why have you done this, he demanded. Why have you allowed the boys to live? The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. The midwives replied, they are more vigorous and have babies so quickly we cannot get there in time. So God was good to the midwives, and the Israelites continued to multiply and grow more and more powerful. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. So these are the first two women that we're going to talk about. These first two women are facing the king of Egypt, who is the most powerful king in the world at this time. And this king is actively trying to control the people. He is wanting to have control over the population, and this was actually a tactic that had been done in other countries at different times, where they would kill all the boys and let the men die out, so essentially ending the generation in that generation. So the women and girls would then become the slaves and the servants in the land, and thus the threat of another nation attacking from within was nullified. The king first tries to pacify and subdue the people of Israel by making them work harder and harder and harder and harder and harder, and God's blessing them, which is a beautiful thing. The harder that Satan tries to, get us down, the more he tries to wipe us out, the more that God blesses us. So as we're leaning into God, God keeps blessing us. And as the Israelites were leaning into God, and as they were just doing what they were forced to do, God continued to bless them. They continue to multiply. So Pharaoh's very upset about this. And so he calls the two Hebrew midwives, and he calls them in and he says, okay, what I need you to do is I need you to kill the baby boys. Let the girls live. Girls on our problem. Let the girls live. Go ahead. But the boys, you need to kill the baby boys. Well, Shiphrah and Puah, these two amazing young ladies who are not married at this time, they fear God. They trust God. And so in spite of the fact that they know that they could lose their lives for disobeying the king, they do not kill the baby boys as they're being born. And I'm sure the dreaded day comes when Pharaoh calls for them and they have to go before the king. And the king is like, why have you let the baby boys live? And they say, the Hebrew women are more vigorous. They are more hardy. They are more strong than the Egyptian women. Now think about this. Egyptians were sitting around doing practically nothing, and the Hebrews, the Israelites, were doing all the work in the land. So the Egyptian women would have been sitting around. They would have been weaker, and the Hebrew women would have been very hardy, very strong, very able. And so what they're saying, the king never questions. So the midwives say, hey, they give birth before we get there. It happens too quickly. We can't kill the baby boys. And so God honors them because they did not commit murder, because they are taking care of his people. God allows them to multiply as well. He gives them family and children. And so the multiplication keeps happening, despite what Pharaoh's trying to do is wipe out God's people. And it's interesting that Pharaoh goes after the baby boys. If we remember, as we were studying the covenant, Jesus was supposed to come through the line of Abraham. So if Satan was able to wipe out all the men, wipe out all the boys, then Satan would effectively be able to stop this prophecy from taking place. But despite the fact that Satan is working hard to wipe out the people of Israel, God is always there, and he is always working in spite of these horrific and difficult circumstances. So the king has a third route to try to oppress the people, and here's what it says in chapter 1, verse 22. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all the people, throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River, but you may let the girls live. So first he tries using slave masters to oppress and enslave the people of Israel, but they multiply. Then he tries to use Shiphrah and Puah, the two midwives, to kill the baby boys. They don't do it. The boys continue to live, and God blesses them, so the people continue to multiply. And so now the king has opened this command to mass murder. Any Egyptian who sees a baby boy, a Hebrew baby boy, is supposed to throw them into the river. As I was growing up, as I heard the story, I always thought it was just like the soldiers who were doing this, and maybe the soldiers were enforcing it, but it actually says here he gave the order to the people, his people, so the actual everyday person. So if I'm walking down the street and I saw a Hebrew baby, I was supposed to take it from its mother and go throw it in the Nile River. The king is so scared of God's people and what they're capable of, but he still wants them there because he wants their work, but he wants to be able to control them. But he wants to wipe out that he is asking his whole country to commit murder. This is when Moses comes on the scene in Exodus chapter 2. About this time, a man and a woman from the tribe of Levi got married. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and she saw he was a special baby and kept him hidden for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she got a basket made of papyrus reeds and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She put the baby in the basket and laid it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. The baby's sister then stood at a distance, watching to see what would happen to him. This baby that was just born is later named Moses. And so we're looking at Moses's mom. So Moses's mom and dad, they're probably very excited. By this time, they have 2 other kids. We learn in other places they have their oldest is Miriam, and then they have a 3-year-old Aaron, who's Moses' older brother at this time. And this edict has gone out where the whole country is supposed to commit mass murder against any Hebrew baby boy that is born. And so I'm sure as Jochebed, that we learn later is the name of Moses' mom, sure as she is pregnant, she is praying, Lord, please give me a girl, give me a girl, give me a girl. But when Moses is born, she looks at him, she sees that he is beautiful. The word there is actually she has a desire for him, a longing to keep him. She sees that he's worth something to her. There's value. And so even though she knows the order is out there to kill all the Hebrew baby boys, she has this internal motherly instinct to do everything she possibly can to take care of this baby boy. And so what she does is she does everything she possibly can to keep him quiet. And if you know anything about babies, the first few months, 3-ish months, they sleep a lot and eat. When they cry, you can quickly feed them and they'll stop crying. And so she was probably able to keep Moses pretty quiet for the first few months, hide him away. He was small enough, he would sleep enough that she could kind of keep him out of sight, out of vision when the people would be walking around. But as he began to get older, as babies do, he began to get more and more restless and more movement, more and more crying, more and more things that just babies do. And she couldn't stop it. And so I don't know what caused her to think of this, but she began to plan. I'm sure she was talking to God, and she's thinking about, how do I keep my baby safe? And we've been told that the Hebrew baby boys have to go into the river. So how do I keep my baby safe? And I believe the Holy Spirit puts on her mind, put him in the river, put him in the river. And she probably knew the story of how God saved Noah and his family in the ark and protected them as the water was all around trying to kill the family and just destroying the world. And so it tells us that she makes an ark. The word for the basket that she makes is the word for the ark used in Genesis for Noah's ark. It's the only 2 places in the Bible it's found, that word. And so Moses is pointing us back as Moses is writing the book of Exodus, because he wrote this down. He is connecting those dots, probably because his mom told him, I had the same faith that Noah had to have as he got in the ark and trusted God. I had to trust God with you. It tells us in Hebrews chapter 11 that his parents had faith. Here's what it says in Hebrews 11 verse 23. It was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months when he was born. When they saw that God had given them an unusual child, they were not afraid to disobey the king's command. And so it tells us that Moses' parents have this faith. Moses' mom has this faith. She has this faith in God. And so she obeys the king's command. She finally gets to the point where she can't disobey it anymore, even though her whole heart's desire is to take care of her child. She'll do anything to protect him and keep him safe. Now she has to keep him safe in a different way. And what she does, every mother and every parent has to get to the place where she's willing to give him back to God and to trust him to to God in the situation. And so what she does is she builds an ark. She goes and gets papyrus reeds, like these big leaves, and then she fills it with pitch and tar and waterproofs it. And then she has to put her precious little baby boy into the basket, and she takes him down to the Nile River, being obedient to the king's command, to the order. She puts him in the river. Granted, that's not how the king wanted it done, but she obeys the letter of the law, and she puts Moses into the river where he's in the reeds, protected, and she stations Moses' older sister, Miriam, nearby so she can keep an eye on him. Probably so that when Moses cries, Miriam can grab the baby, run him back to his mom so he can feed, then go put the baby back in the river. And I'm not sure how long Moses was in the river. Maybe he was in the river for just one day, or maybe he was in the river for multiple days. But it tells us that something interesting happens. As Jochebed, Moses' mom, trusts Moses to God and gives Moses to God, trusting that he is the only one to keep her baby safe, she has got to let go of that. And as mothers and as parents, we have got to come to that same place. Pretty much in every area of our life, but especially with our kids. There are certain things that we can do, but there comes a point where we have got to let go and trust that God is going to protect and lead and guide our children, because we can't control the world. We can't control the things that are going to happen. We can't control their actions. And so we have to trust God. And so Jochebed does just that. And what happens when she trusts Moses to God, when she gives him back and puts him in the river? If you keep reading in Exodus chapter 2, verse 5, soon Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river, and her attendants walked along the riverbank. When the princess saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it for her. When the princess opened it, she saw the baby, a little boy, crying, and she felt sorry for him. This must be one of the Hebrew children, she said. So here comes another woman. I believe God directed Pharaoh's daughter to this specific spot in the river. Now, I don't think that Jochebed would have planned to put Moses where she knew he would be found by an Egyptian, especially a royal Egyptian. She had no way of knowing that Pharaoh's daughter was going to find Moses, so she probably stuck him in a place where she thought was frequented, that people didn't go very often. And I imagined as she stationed Miriam there, she told her to watch and to pay attention, to be careful. If anybody showed up, to be quiet, not run away, just let her know what's happening. But I don't think she planned for Pharaoh's daughter to show up. I firmly believe that the Holy Spirit led Pharaoh's daughter to that location, because he knew that this pagan woman, this woman who didn't know him, still had a heart for God, still had a heart for love, still was kind. Despite what her father had said about all the Hebrews, she wasn't worried, because when she sees the basket, and she probably sees it because she hears the baby crying, she's in the river, her attendants are walking along the riverbank, probably protecting and guarding her in case anybody were to come. And so she sends them to get the basket, most likely because they're closer to the basket, most likely because Miriam would have been probably between 8 and 12 years old. She would have been old enough to watch the basket, but young enough not to be a slave herself, where she would have to be doing slavely duties. And so she would have to been able to get to the river and get it, so it was probably close by in the reeds. As Pharaoh's daughter's taking a bath, she probably hears something, sees the basket, sends her maids to get it. She meets them on the riverbank, and she opens the basket, and instantly she knows what is going on. She knows there is no way that any Egyptian mother is going to put their baby into a basket and leave them in the river unattended. That's just not going to happen. She also knows that the only way a Hebrew mother is going to do that is because of the order that her father has given, that all the baby boys need to be thrown into the river. And now she has a choice. This is not her child. This is not her nation. This is actually someone her father is scared of, that is going to try to overthrow their nation, and they are scared that they are going to be an enemy and a threat. And so her dad is trying to get rid of them all. She has a choice. Do I do what my dad said, what the law said, or do I do something else? Do I follow the prompting of my conscience, which I know is the Holy Spirit? She probably had no idea that God was leading her. And so what does she do? So as she looks in the basket, she says, ah, this must be one of the Hebrew children. There must have been something in the way that she said that led Miriam to believe that now was the time. So here's what happens in verse 7. Another woman enters the scene. Then the sister's baby, or Miriam, approached the princess. Should I go and find a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby for you? She asked. Yes, do, the princess replied. Actually, the word is just go. Yeah, go for it, the princess replied. So the girl went and called the baby's mother. Take this baby and nurse him for me, the princess told the baby's mother. I will pay you for your help. So the woman took her baby home and nursed him. Do you see what happened? Miriam, who's been watching all along, Moses' sister, is paying attention to what's happening on the riverbank. She's watching her brother, who she knows at any moment could be found and killed. She knows it's very dangerous, and so she's watching and paying attention. And I'm sure when she saw Pharaoh's daughter approaching, her heart just sinks, because this is the worst of the worst. Maybe just a common person would overlook it, but this is royalty. This person is going to, if they find Moses, they're going to throw him into the river. And then her heart probably sank even more as she watches Pharaoh's daughter find Moses. But then something changes. As she watches, she sees Pharaoh soft. She probably hears Pharaoh saying, oh, poor baby, you must be hungry. Oh, your mom isn't here to help you. And oh, this is one of the Hebrew baby boys. The only reason you're here is because of the father's eating. Like, she probably hears whatever she hears. She knows that Pharaoh's daughter knows this is a Hebrew. And so she takes this moment and she politely interrupts. She says, excuse me, should I find a Hebrew nurse or a wet maid to come and take care of the baby for you? Now this is interesting. If Pharaoh's daughter intended to adopt and keep Moses, why didn't she take him home with her right away? Well, there's this understanding that you kind of needed a Hebrew to take care of a Hebrew and an Egyptian to take care of an Egyptian. So she couldn't have a wet maid come and live in the palace with her. And so when Miriam shows up on the scene, and maybe Miriam and Jochebed had talked about this, maybe if somebody shows up, you can suggest a Hebrew nurse to take care of the baby, then come get me. I don't know whether they talked about it or not. But regardless, Miriam has this courage. In spite of the risk she's putting herself in, the fact that she knows there's a baby boy in the river, the fact that she's hanging out by the princess and that alone could get her in trouble, she is willing to boldly say, hey, how about I go find a nurse for you? And the princess says, yes, go, do that. Just the word go. Just like Jesus tells us to go and make disciples, the princess tells her to go. And this is all she needs. She runs and gets her mom. And her mom comes back and Pharaoh's daughter says, hey, I'm going to pay you to take care of this baby. She's basically saying, I'm adopting this baby. I am protecting this baby. I am going to give him what nobody else can give him. I'm going to give him protection, a life, and he's going to become royalty. And to show all of that, to make this legal, I am going to pay you to take care of him. And we notice that there's a transference because Miriam says she went and called the baby's mother, but when Pharaoh's talking to her, it says the woman took the baby. Jochebed has to stand there, seeing her son in another woman's arms, and she has to trust that this is God's plan. Then she has to listen while the woman says, I'm adopting this lost baby. I'm going to take care of it. I'll pay you to take care of him. And when he's weaned, you bring him back to me. And she had to do all this with a straight face, without the excitement that her baby was going to live, without the angst and the sadness that she was going to have to give her baby up. Without all that, she had to say, thank you, yes, okay, I'll take care of the baby. And so she takes the baby, and here's what happens as you keep reading. In verse 9, take this baby and nurse him for me, the princess told the baby's mother. I will pay you for your help. So the woman took her baby home and nursed him. Later, when the boy was older, his mother brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son. The princess named him Moses, for as she explained, I lifted him out of the water. So what happens? Jochebed gets a few years with Moses. Commentators disagree on how long Moses would have lived with his mom. Some people say 3 to 4 years until he's weaned, but a lot of time they were considered a child up until the age of 12. And so anywhere between 3 and 12 years, Jochebed now was being paid to take care of her son. Now, I can't even imagine how the day turned around and what began to go through her mind. She starts the day by being so scared that her son is going to be murdered, and she ends the day knowing he is protected by the same people who are trying to murder him. And not only that, she gets paid. She can stop her other jobs, whatever else she was doing, and she's going to be paid to take care of her son. And so now she has time. She has time to lean into Moses and to teach him, because there's only a set amount of time. And my friends, mothers, I want you to understand that we have limited amount of time where we have influence over our kids. And sometimes we take it for granted because the days are long, but my friends, the years are fast and they go fast. And Jochebed leans into Moses. And how do we know she leaned into Moses? Well, if we go back to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 24, it says, "It was by faith Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought it better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward." What this tells us is the time that Jochebed had while Pharaoh's daughter was paying her to raise her son, she leaned into him and she taught him about God. So much so that even at a young age of 3, 4, or 12, or 9, or whatever age he went to live at Pharaoh's court, she had established in him a foundation that was so strong that he refused to accept the pleasures and the palace and all of the intrigue and everything that was around him. Tradition tells us that Pharaoh actually wanted to make him the next Pharaoh of Egypt. We don't know if that's actually true or not, but regardless, he would have had all of the training, all of the information, but he refuses all of that. He doesn't identify that way. He hangs onto his identity as a child of God. But God allows this for a purpose. You see, Jochebed, she sees that there's something special. Even though Pharaoh is trying to wipe out the people of Israel, God is protecting them. And so God uses a whole bunch of women to thwart Pharaoh's own decree. He's not worried about the women. He's let the women live. But it's the 2 midwives that keep Moses alive when he was born. It was Jochebed, his mother, who's willing to fight for him and hide him and risk her own life. It's his sister who's willing to stay there and have the courage to go talk to Pharaoh's daughter. It's Pharaoh's own daughter who adopts Moses and brings him into his own home where he can be taught and raised of God. But then at the right time, it tells us in Exodus chapter 2, later when the baby was older, his mother brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son. So this is unprompted. She knows when the time is up. She's not fighting it. She is trusting God. And again, she has to give Moses back to God. And that's what she does. She takes him back to Pharaoh and to Pharaoh's daughter. And what is Pharaoh's daughter able to do for Moses? Well, it tells us in Acts chapter 7, when Stephen is having his vision and he's giving kind of a history of God's people, this is what it tells us in verse 20, Acts 7, verse 20. "At that time, Moses was born, a beautiful child in God's eyes. His parents cared for him at home for 3 months. When they had to abandon him, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and raised him as her own son. Moses was taught all of the wisdom of the Egyptian and was powerful in both speech and action." So Moses is taught all of the wisdom of the Egyptian, the most powerful nation in the world, and he is powerful in speech and action. So what a slave woman couldn't give her son, she sends him to the palace because God has a plan for Moses. He has a plan for Moses leading the people, and Moses needs to know how to lead and how to govern and how to run a nation and how to run an army. He needs to know the languages. He needs to know how to have courage and take action. These things a slave woman couldn't give her son. And so God uses the actions of Satan and this hardship in her life to propel her son to greatness. But what has to happen in Moses' life as he goes from his own mom to his stepmom, his adopted mom, and she begins to raise him. And God uses these different women at different phrases. Some of them were in a motherhood role, which was Jochebed and Pharaoh's daughter, but some of them were just in the support role, the midwives and his sister. These women surrounding Moses are the ones that enable Moses to become the man that he is, as God is guiding him to the places he needs to be so that he can get the training and the equipping to lead God's people. And so, my friends, as we're looking at this story, we see that God uses the most devastating experiences, that Pharaoh enslaves the people, then he's trying to murder all the boys, and Jochebed has to give up her baby not once but twice. She has to trust God to take care of her baby. But God uses these amazing women. He uses the midwives who protect the baby boys, who don't do this evil thing. He uses Jochebed and her trust and her faith in God. He uses Miriam's courageousness to protect Moses, and he uses Pharaoh's daughter's kind heart to take Moses to a place to train and equip him, to give him skills that he will need later on in life. And we're not going to go through the rest of Moses' story, but I just want us to understand that as we're looking at Mother's Day, God has a call on women. And it's not just to be a biological mother, because more than biological mothers leaned into Moses this time. We had the midwives, we had his sister, we had his mom, and we had his stepmom, his adopted mom, whatever you want to call her. All of these different women had a different role to play, and without them, Moses could not have become the same person that he was. And so, my friends, whether you're a biological mother, or you're speaking into some other kid that's not your kid, or you're an adoptive mom, or a foster mom, or a stepmom, or something else, I want you to understand that God has a purpose and a call on your life and a role for you to play, and it is not something small. It's not something to be overlooked. God had a purpose for each of these amazing women in Moses' life, and he has a purpose for us too. And so as we're going into Mother's Day, don't let the mere fact that your mom's gone, or that you're not a mom, or you're estranged from your kids stop you from leaning into the Holy Spirit and letting him use you for the good in the people's lives around you. And this is for all of us, whether man or woman. We need to lean into the Holy Spirit and let him use us in the worst of times, in the hardest of times, when things are all going wrong. Trust that God will use us. So, my friends, as we've processed this story, what has God said to you? I would love to know. Will you take a moment and grab your connection cards? You can do that by texting the letter CC to 301-321-8848. And let me know, what did God say to you while we were processing the story of Moses and the women that surround him and how God uses them? And secondly, how are you going to respond to God? Because God wants us to respond to him. And lastly, how can we pray for you? Because we can't do this alone. Moses' mom couldn't take care of him by herself. She needed others, and we need each other. So let me pray for you now. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that you are God, that you love us, and that you take care of us. Lord, thank you that you have a call on ladies to be mothers and grandmothers and spiritual mothers and spiritual grandmothers, and that you have a call on us to speak into the lives around us. Lord, I thank you that you have a call on the men as well. And Lord, I just pray that we will follow the prompting of the Holy Spirit, that we will invest in the people that you put in our path, that we will specifically make time to invest in our kids, that we will understand the gravity of the situation and lean into them fully. And Lord, we just thank you for your love and your blessings. In your name we pray. Amen. I want to thank you so much for watching this sermon. This sermon would have aired at 6 o'clock on Friday, and you can join us live on Saturday for a discussion. You can join us at noon in person in our building at 14595 Avion Parkway, or you can join us on Zoom at noon by texting the word study to 301-321-8848. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to processing this passage with you.